families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Families Divided TV. Several pathways exist where grandparents may find themselves experiencing the agony of being estranged or alienated from their grandchildren. Grandparents and extended family members are often cut off from access to grandchildren in such situations. In this episode, Dr. Carol Golly discusses specific circumstances and challenges of grandparents affected by parental and grandparent alienation in the middle generation. Also in this episode, we're going to have Bill Eddy, who was one of our presenters at our upcoming fall conference, October 13th through the 15th. It's right here upon us. This is a virtual international conference. We're really excited about it. The title of it is Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and the Abuse. These are some excellent presenters with excellent presentations. We're going to have much in store for you during this 2.5-day conference. You really don't want to miss it, and I hope you can join us. If you can't be with us the whole time, we record, and you can go back and play it whenever you want to see it. So that will be good for you, but you've got to register now to do so. We're also wanting you to know that we're also having donations that you can make to us at Family Access Fighting for Children's Rights. All 100% of what you donate goes right back into the cause, and there's no overhead. And what we make basically goes to Families Divided TV. So if Families Divided TV is helping you in any way, I really hope you will go ahead and donate. We are no longer going to be a 501c3 organization as of the end of this year. Our board has decided to vote against that. I have too much going on. So November 30th will be your last opportunity to make a donation. So please do so and help us as we help you. Thank you much. We're going to be back in just a moment, right after these messages, with Dr. Carol Golly and Bill Eddy.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Sadly, too many know the pain and trauma associated with parental and grandparent alienation. Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, will present an important international virtual conference on October the 13th through the 15th, 2023. Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse will feature world-renowned experts in the field of alienation. You'll join conference event coordinator Elaine Cobb and moderator Megan Hunter as they introduce you to keynote speaker Dr. Edward Crook. Plus, you'll hear important presentations from Dr. Joshua Coleman, Lisa Rothfuss, Dr. Mary Alvarez, Chris Smith, Bill Eddy, Dr. Sue Kornbluth, Dr. William Burnett, Melanie Gill, and Megan Hunter. Join the many attendees already securing their spot for the conference. Alienation, the truth regarding the trauma and abuse. Visit familyaccess.info for all the details. This special conference is being hosted by Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, by Still Partners Foundation, and by PASCA. Parental alienation is child abuse.
Hello, my name is Carol Golly, and I live in Naples, Florida. I was a child and family therapist for years and was involved in quite a few situations through the court and with my families regarding parental alienation, which is our topic today. And I wanted to thank Families Divided and Elaine Cobb in Family Access for having me on the program today. I'm just thrilled to be here. I wanted to start by introducing a little bit of information about grandparent and parental alienation. I think a lot of you probably know because there have been so many wonderful YouTube episodes on Families Divided already, but I thought I would just give a brief intro for those who may not have had access to the prior shows. So we know there are instances where grandparents and grandchildren have disruptions or a cutoff in their relationships. There are other pathways also by which grandparents can sadly be cut off from their relationships with their grandchildren. And these could include if the adult child, in other words, the child of the grandparent, if the adult child is incarcerated, or perhaps they have substance abuse issues, or they move across the world, then that can be very difficult to maintain relationships between grandparents and grandchildren also. But what I wanted to focus on today, because it does bring some unique characteristics, is grandchildren who are alienated from their grandchildren's because the parents are experiencing generally divorce and parental alienation. And what that means is one of the parents, called an alienating or programming parent, can trash talk, use strategies to alienate and turn the children against their other parent and the grandparents. And they may use the strategies such as bad mouthing, lying about things, threatening. These things can be very subtle too. It can just be the bad look when, oh, it's your father on the phone. You know, it can be very subtle, or it can be very blatant with, you know, screaming and yelling going on every time the child mentions the grandparent or the alienated parent's name. So the child feels that there's maybe withdrawal of love from the alienating parent if they continue to show love and affection to their alienated or targeted parent and that parent's parents, in other words, the children's parents. So it's quite an active program to kind of destroy these relationships that are very powerful and so enjoyed by most families. It's, you know, it's so normal for children to have grandparents that help guide them through life and offer up historical family information, cultural information about the family, love and support in so many ways, everything from financial to emotional support. And it's not the norm. So it really takes some interference. Even if a parent abused a child, children still contort themselves in ways to try to gain the affection of that parent. So we know that alienation tactics are very effective, and really one of the only ways to turn a child against a formerly beloved parent. So no matter the pathway to being alienated, it's extremely painful for parents and grandparents. And although each pathway is slightly different in the way it manifests in the family, we don't know that much about it yet, because this grandparent alienation is fairly new as a research topic, and researchers want to gather voices of grandparents and parents that have experienced alienation to learn more about it and perhaps see what can be done about it and how to best help those grandparents. So we are researchers and grandparents, are working together to try to share this fairly new phenomenon. It's so important to study and learn new strategies to help grandparents, and also to address this in the court system. So one sign of parental alienation, if a parent is cut off, then the targeted parent's only recourse may be through the court system. They could try mediation, and in some cases that are mild in nature, there can be some hope for problem solving, that even to the point of making sure that grandparents are in the picture in a divorce agreement, which would be a wonderful, and really maybe it's one of the only ways that grandparents can really protect their rights, and really the child's right to see the grandparent. So if any kind of agreement can be put into place before a divorce agreement in the litigation process, that would be extremely helpful. Let's see. So one sign, the researchers have developed a 5-part model to identify when parental alienation is occurring. And this is very helpful for the court system. And one of the 5th signs includes that grandparents, extended family members, have been outed of the family along with the targeted parent. And it's called spread of animosity to the extended family. And that's considered, particularly egregious because of the importance of grandparents, the role that they fulfill for children and families. And I know we discussed a little of that, but it's very helpful for children to know their sense in intergenerational families. And this is what it means to be in our family, and this is where we've come from, and this is what our family values are. And to share that with grandchildren is terribly important for the well-being of grandchildren and also for grandparents. And it's considered that excluding grandparents from a child's life is a form of family violence. And it's about power and control on an alienating parent, taking power and control and using that to decide who can see the children and who cannot. And there are elements in that of interpersonal partner violence and child abuse. So the experience of cut-off grandparents, which is another word for alienated grandparents, when they're cut off from their grandchildren, then they're usually working closely with their biological child. because that would be the person that was, the brunt of the parental alienation, generally in the divorce process. So the grandparents would be supporting their adult child and hopefully having some kind of contact with their grandchildren, but that's not always the case, unfortunately. And sometimes grandparents become what you could call collateral damage. They're outed along with their child, who is the alienated parent. So, and there are several themes common to grandparents affected by grandparent alienation that I've noticed. And I did a doctoral dissertation on exploratory study on grandparents who were cut off from grandchildren, and also, learning from other psychologists and attorneys and listening to grandparents. And researchers have identified 4 themes that are kind of particular to the pathway of parental alienation as cut off, but these could apply to lots of the other pathways as well of alienation. But one of the main things that's particularly sad is the race against time. And that means the time frames for the child and the grandparent and the court system. And the children's time frame, really, most people think of this as 1 to 18 when children become adults and can make their own decisions about who they want to see. But children's time goes fast. Those 18 years are quick, and children, one grandparent said, a kid is a kid. They live every day as if it was a year. If my granddaughter is 3 and she hasn't met me for over a year, I'm afraid I'll be a complete stranger to her, like I was never in her life, and I feel erased. So here's a grandmother that is, feeling this is happening so fast, and I need to see her and give her that loving memory and warmth of me and safety of me. And she's not being allowed to do that. And so that's an example of, kind of the desperation of the time frame, the frantic nature for grandparents of, this has got to stop. I don't have that many years left that I can share my wisdom and my love and enjoy my grandchildren. And then there's the legal system time frame, which moves at a snail's pace. As people that have been in court know, you could have a hearing where just beginning, a judge is learning about the family situation, and then the next hearing could be in 6 months, and then it could be a winter break for the court for 2 months, and then a hearing in another 6 weeks. And I've seen these go on in families that I've worked with for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and that's a long time. So the court system moves in a completely different time frame as do the families that are experiencing this horrendous situation. And that causes so much stress and anxiety and fear, of course, for alienated grandparents and parents. And the sense that time is running out and the courts are taking so long can lead to a limited perception of the future. What will my future look like? Is it worth me trying to just hang in there with everything I have? Because it takes me everything I can do just to get out of bed some days. And it's such a horrendous struggle for people experiencing this grief and loss. So that's very harmful to grandparents' health, that these situations can take so long to be resolved. And grandparents have a limited time to share their many gifts with their grandchildren. There's also something that's common to grandparents that are alienated by any pathway, and that a lot of times the rest of the world doesn't really understand it. It's not that they don't care and want to help, but they don't understand that it's like a death. But the person that you love is still physically present, but they're not emotionally available. So that's one of the definitions of ambiguous grief, which is one of the most difficult types of grief to cope with, because it can go on and on and on with no closure. And grandparents say, everywhere I went, I was looking. I was imagining what my child would look 5 years older, and everywhere I go, I look, and just, the sadness about other people not really understanding that as much, because, their grandparents might talk to their friends who are enjoying their grandparents, and so they don't really want to talk about, well, I'm sorry that you don't see yours, but I'm having a good time with mine. And that's very difficult. And I live in Florida, which is the grandparent state, so you can imagine how many alienated grandparents see other grandparents interacting, and that's very painful too. So alienated grief can go on for many years. It's normal to have a PTSD with it, which is having thought intrusion, like thoughts about the last time you saw your grandchild, or what it would look like if you never did again, or having nightmares. Those kinds of flashback typify PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And grandparents can be very subject to this. And it's very poor effect. It affects health, because it's always got stress hormones releasing in our bodies when we have PTSD. So that's very, very difficult. And this is difficult to talk about, but on the survey that I did of 275 grandparents that had no contact with their grandchildren in 2019, we had about 20% that had considered suicide. And then the parents who had been experiencing alienation for 2 or 3 years or 4, there was one grandparent who said, I had to comment on this question because I used to feel like that, but now I feel more like I don't really care what happens to me, but I don't have an active plan to commit suicide. But it's just that I don't look forward to every day like I used to, even though I still have hope. So there's that, just feeling so discouraged. And I think that's why studying and knowing grandparents' voices in this is so terribly important, because this is a very serious health issue that our nation needs to be addressing, that the CDC needs to address. And this is very, very serious. Some reflections. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing how much time I have. Reflections of grandparents that were suffering from PA-related cutoff sometimes said things such as, I'm not sure who I am now. If I don't have access to my grandchildren, what am I? And having to redefine themselves at a stage in life which their life trajectory had, raising a family, had always planned on enjoying these years as much as possible. And so, having a sense of what is my self-identity now, and also having a shattered sense of family, because the adult children and spouse and the grandchildren can be loving one day and then just switch so suddenly, and grandparents are left wondering, and the alienated parent, what went wrong? What did I do wrong? I don't understand this. It can be gradual, but it can also be very sudden. And so there's that just, very sudden hate, loving one day, just hateful the next. That was not a part of the family and grandparent plan to have that family rupture. And an awful lot of grandparents in the research described what's called a just world belief that growing up thinking good things usually happen to good people and bad things can happen to bad people. And so you live your life as a good person and you don't expect these bad things to happen, but they can. And to shatter your life view about generally, working hard, doing what you can, providing for your family, raising your kids, wanting to enjoy your grandchildren and having plans of things to do with them is really shattering a worldview in how the world should operate. And so a lot of the grandparents said, not being able to believe any longer that the world is a just, good place really shattered my belief in how things would look from here on out. If I'm good, will I get to see my grandchildren again? Does it matter? How do you even define that of what being good is when you've been dragged over the coals like that? So that was a common theme, was having their thoughts about a just world shattered. So another theme that is a little more hopeful in this, and really more common to, it would be more common to parental alienation pathway, is that some grandparents said, I wasn't really that close to my adult son or my adult daughter because they had their lives and we had ours, and we loved them, but we were busy and everything was good, but we weren't that close. And then when the alienation hit the middle generation, then the divorce, and the adult child, the dad or mom, was just absolutely devastated and just barely able to cope, because they would probably seek court intervention and to cope with really the abuse that they're enduring, can bring them closer to their parents, because they desperately need their parents' support, emotionally, maybe financially if possible. But that is one thing the grandparents reported at some times, that as painful as it was for them to hear the stories from their sons and daughters who were being horrifically alienated, and it was so hard to listen to what was happening, but they did that, and it brought them closer because they needed each other. They need each other. So there is some sign that the intergenerational closeness, between those people in the family can be greatly enhanced. So that was something that was good to know amidst all that suffering. There could be a positive aspect to that. So I have just about out of time, but I wanted to just share with you a couple of quotes that are from grandparents, because I think they say it best. I'm not an alienated grandparent, and so I'm learning from grandparents that I meet with and speak to, and I just think their quotes are so powerful. This is one from a 78-year-old grandmother. I already lived my life to the fullest. Now my children and my grandchildren are my life. A grandmother got kicked off a Facebook group, and sometimes that gets reported because the PA groups are they only want to focus on the alienated parents. Some of them, unfortunately. This grandmother, who is 78, was kicked out of a Parental Alienation Facebook group chat because it's all she could find to support and understand alienation. But unfortunately, some of the PA groups only want alienated parents in that group, which is a shame. But the good news is there is wonderful groups just for alienated grandparents, and sadly, the groups are growing, and that means we've got so many alienated grandparents. But fortunately, they're finding support by going to learn about Family Access, which is Elaine Cobb's wonderful group, and her website is terrific and lists the YouTube's information and support groups. There's also Alienated Grandparents Anonymous.com. And I'm a founding board member with them. We go by AGA, and we have a list on our website of available support groups, many which are virtual. And both Family Access and AGA have articles just for grandparents that can be very helpful. And we can connect you with people, near you who may have a group or have a virtual session with you. So, there are good supports for grandparents now, thanks to these wonderful groups. And right now, I know Family Access is growing so much, and AGA has, we have strategic alliances that are, you would call them chapters, but legally we have to call them strategic alliances in about 35 countries. And almost all 50 states. So you can see there is quite a network that's developed to support grandparents and hopefully gain more legal standing and grandparents' rights. And so the rest of the world will understand also what grandparents are experiencing. Because a lot of the social outlets, the legal entities, and the mental health world don't always understand this. And so it's really important, if you do get counseling, seek counseling, to find somebody who's trained in grandparent alienation. Because otherwise they can make it worse and say, well, it sounds like you really messed up. And, alienation is a horrible, accusatory, abusive situation. And we don't tell people who have beaten by a spouse, well, really, you brought that on, so that's not what we want to say to alienated grandparents either. They need understanding and strategies and support. So I think I'm about out of time, and I want to thank you all so much for listening. And if you'd like, feel free to reach me through Elaine Cobb or through alienatedgrandparentsanonymous.com. And I wish you all the best, and I'll be thinking of you all. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Eddy, and I'm going to be presenting a program at the October 2023 Family Access Conference. And my program presentation will be Separating Alienation from Estrangement, Two Opposite Forms of Abuse. So we're really talking about making professionals and parents more aware of the subject of alienation. Often the argument is made that a rejected parent isn't being a victim of alienation, but has actually caused estrangement with their own child. And so I want to talk about what estrangement is and what it isn't, because we see people falsely accused of estrangement with the child. And now sometimes there is estrangement, and we see people falsely accused of alienating the child. So I'm a family lawyer, family therapist, and family mediator. And from my perspective, I really want to explain the differences between alienation and estrangement. And real briefly, estrangement is when a parent's own behavior, and it doesn't have to be physical abuse, sexual abuse. It may be emotional abuse, where a parent is yelling at a child, breaking the child's property, demeaning the child, putting the child down to the point that the child wants to get away from that parent and resists or refuses contact with that parent because of their own behavior. Now, with alienation, we know that one of the 5-factor model factors, number 3, is that there's the absence of abuse or neglect or seriously deficient parenting by the now rejected parent. So it's important to be able to figure these out, to understand the differences, and if you're involved in a case, to be able to help professionals figure this out much more quickly, because we all know alienation grows throughout the conflict over whether the child's alienated or not. And if there's estrangement, a parent needs to get treatment for that. And if there's alienation, a parent needs to get treatment for that. But most of all, the child needs to be protected from both types of abusive behavior, whichever is occurring in a case. So I'm going to talk about all of that. And I hope I get to see you next October 2023 conference of Family Access.
On our next episode of Families Divided TV, Dr. Stan Carosi presents to us on parental alienation, the cancel culture no one talks about, and its implications for families and society.